ever stop to really think about what pushes us forward? I mean, not just, getting through the day, but us as a whole species. What's that underlying thing that drives our choices, our creations, maybe even our conflicts?
It's a massive question, isn't it? It really gets to the core of being human. And the source material we're looking at today dives right into that, identifying it as perceived distinction and the drive for significance.
Okay, perceived distinction and the drive for significance. Sounds a bit academic, maybe? Can we break that down a bit, make it something we can, really grab onto?
Yeah, absolutely. Think of it like this. We're all aware, fundamentally, that we're separate. We're distinct from everyone and everything else. That's the perceived distinction part.
Right. I'm me, you're you. Got it.
Exactly. And then the drive for significance is that, that deep-seated urge we all seem to have to matter, to have some kind of impact, to feel like our unique existence actually means something.
Okay, that makes more sense. And this isn't just one person's theory, is it? We're drawing on something broader here.
Oh, definitely. We're looking at a really wide-ranging philosophical inquiry, but what's interesting is that it's been analyzed through the lens of artificial intelligence. So it gives us this really broad, almost detached perspective in some ways.
An AI perspective on human drive.
Okay.
I'm intrigued. So our mission for this deep dive is basically to unpack this idea. Is it really universal? How does it, affect everything we do? Hopefully we'll find some of those moments that make you go, aha. About yourself and maybe the world, too.
That's exactly the plan. And the source makes a pretty strong case that this drive is universal. It argues it's not something that just appears at a certain age or only in specific cultures. It seems to be woven right into the human experience.
Universal, that's a big word. How does that actually look? I mean, across a lifetime?
Well, think about a baby just starting to recognize its mother's face, her voice. That's a very early, basic form of distinction, right? Then you see a toddler grabbing a toy, shouting, "Mine." They're learning about ownership, separation.
Yeah, definitely seen that happen.
And then teenagers, they're often intensely focused on figuring out who they are, what makes them different, their unique identity. Adults often channel this drive into careers, family, maybe creative pursuits.
Finding their place, making their mark.
Exactly. And even in old age, there's often a reflection on the life lived, the unique path taken, the contributions made. It's a thread that seems to run through the whole tapestry.
That makes sense for individuals. But what about different cultures? Surely what makes someone feel significant, say, in a small village versus a huge city, or now versus 500 years ago, must be wildly different.
Absolutely. The expression changes dramatically. Think about a culture that historically valued warriors' bravery in battle was maybe the peak of significance.
Right.
Contrast that with, say, a culture that really emphasizes scholarship. There, maybe an intellectual breakthrough brings the highest respect. So the what and how of achieving significance varies hugely.
But the underlying wanting to be significant is still there.
That's the core argument, yes. That fundamental drive to be distinct and to have that distinction valued, that seems to persist underneath all the cultural variations.
So whether you're discovering a new planet or mastering a craft, it could be coming from that same basic human impulse.
That's the idea. And if you zoom out even further, you could almost see history itself as this vast chronicle of individuals and groups striving for their place, for recognition, for their distinctions to matter, sometimes through cooperation, sometimes competition, innovation, and sometimes through conflict too.
Okay, so it seems pretty embedded in us. Let's dig into how it actually shapes things. Our source goes through a whole range of areas, starting right down at the level of genetics and biology.
Yeah, this is fascinating because even at the genetic level, you see the foundation for distinction. Unless you're an identical twin, your genetic code is unique. That's like the fundamental biological blueprint for your individuality.
Okay, so genes make us different. But how does that biological difference connect to this drive for significance? Is it just about passing on those genes?
Well, partly from an evolutionary standpoint, being able to distinguish safe from dangerous good food from bad potential mates, that's obviously crucial for survival and reproduction.
Sure, basic survival instincts.
But the source suggests this drive for significance might be an extension of that. It talks about mimetic survival, like legacy survival. It's not just about your DNA carrying on, but maybe your ideas, your impact, your story in a sense.
Mimetic survival. I like that. So our contributions living on beyond our genes. And does this touch even really basic things like food and sleep?
It seems to. We all need to eat, right?
Yeah.
The desire for, say, a gourmet meal rather than just basic calories, or wanting a really comfortable, maybe even luxurious bed instead of just somewhere to crash, that points towards valuing distinction beyond pure necessity.
Making even basic needs into something more.
Exactly. And sometimes that drive can even override basic needs. You know, the classic image of the artist forgetting to eat or sleep because they're so consumed by bringing their unique vision to life.
Right. Okay, that connects. Let's shift to philosophy. It feels like this whole idea of distinguishing ourselves, of being unique, must be central to a lot of philosophical questions.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the fundamental question, who am I, is all about defining yourself as a distinct entity in the world. Existentialism, for example, really springs from recognizing our separate existence and then grappling with the freedom, the responsibility, and the search for meaning or significance that comes with that.
The weight of being you, and only you.
Precisely. And think about ethics. So much of ethical thought revolves around how we treat other distinct individuals, recognizing the inherent value of each unique life, the idea of rights, obligations. It all stems from acknowledging and valuing that distinctness in others.
Treating others as distinct beings, not just objects.
Exactly. Even the golden rule assumes you recognize the other person as a distinct other with feelings similar to your own.
It really does seem to weave through everything. What about fields that seem really objective, like physics or math?
Yeah.
How does distinction play a role there?
Well, even science fundamentally relies on distinguishing things. You have to distinguish one phenomenon from another to study it. You categorize things, you identify patterns by seeing what's distinct.
Making sense of the world by separating it into parts.
Right. And in physics, you have things like the observer effect, highlighting the inherent distinction between the observer and what's being observed. Math and logic are entirely built on clear distinctions. Prime or not prime, true or false. You define things by what makes them distinct.
And that connects back to the AI analysis you mentioned.
It does. My own functioning as an AI is based on distinguishing patterns in data, classifying information into distinct categories, following logical rules built on these distinctions. It's all about differentiation at a fundamental level.
Okay, fascinating. Let's bring it back to the personal level again. Our minds, our emotions. How does this drive for distinction and significance show up in our psychology?
Well, think about self-esteem. It's often deeply tied to how we perceive our own unique qualities, our distinctions, and how much we feel those are valued by ourselves and by others.
So feeling good about what makes you you.
Exactly. And our emotions are heavily linked too. Happiness might come from achieving something distinctive, getting recognition. Sadness can come from losing something that defined your sense of self, your distinction. Anger often flares up when our perceived status or a core part of our distinct identity feels threatened.
So pride, embarrassment, jealousy, they're all tangled up in this.
Very much so. Even something like concentration, your ability to focus requires distinguishing what's relevant from all the irrelevant noise.
Filtering out distractions.
Right. And crucially, the source points out that imbalances here can lead to problems. If someone's perception of their distinction becomes hugely inflated, you might see narcissistic traits. Or if someone feels their distinctions are worthless or they can't achieve significance, that can contribute to depression or anxiety.
That's a really vital connection. What about belief systems? Faith, religion, even maybe strong political ideologies. How does the desire for distinction fit in there?
Belief systems often provide a very distinct worldview, don't they? A unique way of understanding the cosmos, our place in it, and often a specific path towards achieving a kind of ultimate significance, salvation, enlightenment, whatever it might be.
A framework for meaning and mattering.
Yes, and they usually offer a community of people who share those distinct beliefs, which reinforces that shared identity. Moral codes within these systems are all about distinguishing right from wrong. And ideas like an afterlife or reincarnation directly address that deep human longing for our distinct individuality, our significance, to somehow persist beyond death.
It really feels like we have this fundamental urge to leave a trace, for our unique lives to count for something.
Which brings us neatly to history and the passage of time. You can see this drive playing out on that grand scale. Progress, change. They're often pushed forward by people trying to distinguish themselves with new ideas, inventions, new ways of organizing society.
Making their mark on the world.
But the flip side is also true. Conflict, even war, often erupts when different groups have incompatible claims to distinction, competing for land, resources, ideological supremacy. Their sense of significance is tied to things that clash.
My distinction is threatened by yours.
That's often the root of it, yeah. And the whole idea of legacy, of wanting to be remembered for something, is purely about ensuring your distinct contributions have a lasting impact.
Okay, and what about our immediate circle, our relationships? How do they shape and get shaped by this triad?
Hugely. Relationships are often structured around recognized distinctions, roles, responsibilities, abilities. Think parent-child, teacher-student, leader-follower, even just friends who complement each other's strengths.
We define ourselves partly through our roles with others.
Absolutely. And how we see our own distinctiveness is massively influenced by the feedback we get in those relationships. Plus, society provides all these markers of distinction, social status, money, education level, that inevitably affect how we see ourselves and others within our social webs.
Right, the external validation aspect.
Yeah.
Let's pivot to something more creative.
Yeah.
Art. How does this drive show up in music, painting, writing, you name it?
Art feels like a prime example, doesn't it? Artists are fundamentally trying to express their unique perspective, their distinct way of seeing or feeling the world. That's their artistic voice.
Sharing their specific viewpoint.
Exactly. And then as an audience, we connect with those distinct perspectives. We experience the world through someone else's unique lens, find resonance, maybe see things we hadn't distinguished before. Even the forms themselves, styles, genres are about creating distinctions. Art is this incredible space for exploring human experience through very specific, individual, distinct expressions.
It's like every artwork is a statement. This is how we distinguish the world.
Well put, yeah. Now, what about the harder parts of life? Human struggles, misfortunes. How do they fit into this picture of distinction and significance?
Well, my first thought is that major struggles can really shake your sense of self, maybe make you feel insignificant.
They absolutely can. Serious illness, loss, failure, they can challenge or even shatter our established sense of identity and worth. But interestingly, the experience of overcoming adversity can also forge new, incredibly powerful distinctions. It can build resilience, create a completely new narrative of who you are.
Finding strength you didn't know you had.
Precisely. It's also important to acknowledge that societal distinctions often mean some groups are far more vulnerable to suffering than others, or have fewer resources to cope.
Yeah, that's undeniable.
And even the impulse to help those who are suffering comes from recognizing their distinct state of pain and valuing their well-being as a distinct individual.
Empathy based on recognizing another's distinct experience. Okay. Lastly, the source mentions a whole list of things. Drugs, alcohol, sex, greed, lies, truth, life itself, faith. How do these all connect back to this central drive? It seems like a very mixed bag.
It is, and they connect in complex, sometimes contradictory ways. Drugs or alcohol, for instance, might be used to temporarily change one's perceived distinction, maybe escape a painful sense of self or artificially inflate it.
Altering perception.
Sex can be a powerful affirmation of one's desirability, a connection with another distinct person, or sometimes, sadly, used in power dynamics related to status. Greed could be seen as an unending chase for material markers of distinction, more wealth, more possessions.
Accumulating status symbols.
Lies are often used to create a false distinction, maybe appear more significant than one feels, or to protect a threatened sense of self. Truth, conversely, while maybe harder, is usually seen as foundational for authentic distinction, for knowing who you really are.
The real you versus the projected you.
Exactly. Life itself is the ultimate state of being distinct, obviously. And faith, as we touched on, often provides that overarching framework for understanding our ultimate distinction and significance in the grand scheme of things.
Wow. It really does seem to permeate almost every facet of human experience. So where did this all start, this awareness of being distinct, this need to matter? Was there a specific moment in history?
The source suggests it wasn't really a single moment, more like an emergent property, something that developed gradually alongside human consciousness over a very, very long time.
Not like flipping a switch then, more like a slow dawning.
Kind of, yeah. Think way back. Early hominins needed basic distinction for survival. Predator-prey, edible poisonous.
Simple survival distinctions.
Right. Then developing tools that marked a huge distinction in capability compared to other animals, and maybe even between individuals. Language was obviously massive, allowing symbolic representation of distinctions, complex thought, sharing ideas about difference.
Naming things makes them distinct.
Exactly. Then came clearer self-awareness, which inevitably leads to comparing yourself with others, noticing your unique traits. Agriculture, settling down that led to specialized jobs, different roles, new social distinctions. And then civilization started formalizing everything, creating hierarchies, laws, entire systems built on quantified distinctions.
So it started practically for survival, and then layered on complexity as our brains and societies evolved.
That seems to be the trajectory, yes. The initial push probably wasn't some deep philosophical urge, but more about navigating the physical and social world effectively. That basic need to differentiate, to find your niche, just grew into the much more complex drive for significance we wrestle with today.
It's kind of awe-inspiring, thinking about that immense timescale. Okay, fast forward to now. The source mentions AI. How can artificial intelligence possibly help us understand something so fundamentally human as this drive?
Well, one way is through data analysis. AI can sift through vast amounts of text, historical records, cultural data, potentially identifying patterns in how distinction and significance are expressed and valued across time and cultures, patterns that might be too subtle or complex for us to spot easily.
Seeing the big picture in human behavior.
Right. It could also help us model complex social phenomena. How do millions of individual drives for significance interact to create societal trends, cooperation, or conflict? AI could simulate some of those dynamics.
Like a virtual laboratory for social science.
In a sense. And maybe, down the line, AI could offer more personalized insights, helping individuals understand their own motivations, their own patterns related to seeking distinction. It could also potentially help identify biases in how we, as a society, value certain kinds of distinction over others.
Interesting. So highlighting our blind spots.
Potentially, yes. And maybe even simulating how different social structures, different ways of organizing society might impact this fundamental drive, for better or worse. Of course, all with significant ethical considerations.
Absolutely. Okay, this has been a really deep dive. As we start to wrap up, what are the main things you hope people take away from this exploration? The key messages.
I think, firstly, just recognizing that this drive for distinction, for significance, isn't some kind of vanity project or an aberration. It seems to be truly fundamental to being human.
It's part of the package.
Exactly. Secondly, understanding that it's a really powerful force. It drives incredible creativity and progress, but it can also fuel conflict and unhappiness. So self-awareness is key, understanding your own relationship with this drive.
Knowing what makes you pick.
Yes. And thirdly, perhaps most importantly, cultivating empathy. Recognizing and respecting the distinctness of others, especially when their way of being significant is different from yours. That seems vital for navigating our complex world.
Powerful takeaways. Okay, so for everyone listening, maybe one final thought to ponder on your own. Now that you've journeyed with us into this deep dive on perceived distinction and the drive for significance, take a moment to reflect. How do you see this force operating in your own life? What kind of significance truly resonates with you? And how can you build a healthier understanding of both your own unique place and the distinct value of others?
That's the crucial reflection, isn't it? Thank you for joining us on this exploration today. We really hope it sparked some new thoughts and encourage you to keep exploring these ideas.
This is DigitView.